All right, thanks for staying with us on Trust TV's Daybreak this morning. Right now it's time for us to take a look at our first conversation of the day, and it has to do about the Constitution. Now, Section 134 of the 1999 Constitution has been giving different interpretations, so to speak. Some of the view that so far as a candidate has not less than 1/4 of the votes cast at the election in each of at least 2/3 of all the states, he does not necessarily need to get 1/4 of the votes cast in the FCT. While others are of the view that getting 1/4, that is 25% of the votes cast in FCT, is mandatory in addition to getting 25% in 2/3 of the states around the Federation. Now, we're trying to get more perspectives on this, and we have joining us in the studio a senior advocate of Nigeria in person of Mr. Sam Kago, and welcome very much to David.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so this section has been and has come to the fore since the presidential elections took place. Some people saying you need 25% in Abuja no matter what you score elsewhere for you to be declared president. Some are saying Abuja is just like any other state when it comes to getting 25% as well. What is the interpretation of this section? I mean, what does it actually say?
The best I can do is to give my own opinion.
Exactly, your own opinion.
Yeah, because it's for the court to do the interpretation. But this is my thoughts. Let's start from the beginning. Nigeria is described in or defined in Section 2 of the Constitution, which is one indivisible country, and it is constituted by 36 states and the federal capital. That is what Nigeria is. So if you are referring to Nigeria at all times, it has to be the 36 states and the federal capital, because that's the language of the Constitution. So as lawyers, you are limited to speak the language of the law. If the Constitution on its own has stated this, it is always very convenient for you to use the same language. And the Constitution also goes further to say, in terms of the presidential election, you only have one constituency, the whole of the Federation, that is the whole of the 36 states
and the federal capital
are one constituency. And the law and the principles that I know, that I studied, is that the Constitution does not talk in parables. The Constitution is not like any other law that can afford to be ambivalent. The Constitution is always saying what it says. And what it does not say, you can input. And that is why I think it's one of the most easiest literature you can read, because it is drafted for anybody to understand, because at the end of the day, ignorance of its provision, they say, is no excuse. And also, like I said, if the Constitution wants anything, it says it. If the Constitution wants to say you must have 1/4 of the vote cast in 36 of the Federation, and wants to separate it from the federal capital, it will do it in a very clear language. And not to say you infer from it and you start getting ideas, innovations.
Well, Mr. Kago,
yes.
Some lawyers who are putting forth this argument, because I have found that even amongst lawyers, there's a division on this particular issue. Some say you don't have to get in 24 states, including the FCT. Some say you must get the FCT. Now, their argument is on that and. They are insisting that the Constitution says in 36 states of the Federation and the FCT. So
that language, that language, I have stated that is how the Constitution defines Nigeria. 36 states of the Federation and the federal capital. So whenever you want to refer to Nigeria, that's the language you have to use, because the Constitution has already defined Nigeria like that. And let me get back to the point I'm saying. If the Constitution really wants to give that interpretation that Abuja is a special state, it cannot be that casual about it. It would say it in categorical language. It cannot allow you to make imputation or inferences for you to arrive at that. It will state so, because the implication is it's very, what would I call, alarming for a constitution to be that casual. You just leave it for you to make an inference. No, it will state it. It would give it specific provision to say this is what it is. Take a look at the pains it takes in stating how you win an election as a president, whether as one candidate, whether as two candidates, or whether as two or more candidates. It stated it repeatedly. You may say, this is verbose. But yes, because he does not want you to have to make inferences. It's not like a biblical book that somebody will read and start making extrapolation. That is not the Constitution. The Constitution does not allow you to make inferences, extrapolations, or whatever it is. Because what? It is the foundation of the legal system, it's the foundation of the law, it's the foundation of every principles, all the principles of law that we know. That is the basic. So it has to say what it means and what it wants. You cannot.
Some might argue that if the Constitution was that simple,
yes,
it was that simple to understand, then why all this back and forth when it comes to not only this issue that we're talking about, but other issues as well when it comes to constitutional interpretation? Why is it so difficult to interpret?
Well, you see, this is how I always think, and this is how I always express myself. Nobody teaches me substantive justice. Nobody teaches me to make conclusions. What I am taught are principles of reasoning as a lawyer. But most times, our colleagues, they tend to jettison their role and their profession as lawyers for which they are trained. They become activists, they become moralists, they become analysts, and all of these, you don't have a forte because, hey, if we want to talk about being analytical or being polemical or whatever, the activists are better at it. If you bring an activist here to talk about this, he would be smarter in making his extrapolations, in making his own suggestions, because they are good in rhetorics. They're good in polemics, in logic. That is their forte. A lawyer can't go that route because you are dealing with live issues. You are not dealing with theoretical or suppositions or suggestibilities. You are dealing with live issues. And the law teaches you how to reason. And like I am saying, the law says the Constitution would always mean what it means. Whatever it says, that is what it means. So you don't go to say, because of this, this is what this is saying. No, there is no because. In the interpretation of the Constitution, you cannot say you do by analogy, because this one says this and therefore this. That you cannot do with the Constitution.
So what the statement you just made right now, is it an indictment on the capacity of some practitioners of the legal profession?
That would be me going out of line. You understand? Yeah. All I am saying, there is always that temptation. There is always that temptation for we to tell people what they want to hear.
Exactly.
There is always that temptation for us to be. In any case, we are human beings. We all have our six senses that are made up of our emotions. You know, we are not always that objective or whatever. There is always some aspect of emotions.
You know,
but to me, like I am saying, saying my training is that I should be speaking sounds emotions. That is, no matter what emotions I have or feelings or likeness that I have, I cannot be speaking like a lawyer and commingle that with my training or what my training tells me to do.
You know, what you said, that's what I always thought of the law. I felt that in law,
Yes.
or anything that had to do with the constitution, A should be A, B should be B,
That is it.
not subject to. So it was a bit surprising when this particular issue was being argued in different ways by same lawyers.
It's a storm and a teacup. I would always say, like Shakespeare would say, all fury and no substance, with due respect. If the Constitution wants that, if that is what it means, it's going to tell you that in plain language and not leave it for you to say because there is an and somewhere. Of course, there has to be an and because you have to refer to Nigeria. And how do you refer to Nigeria? Once you've mentioned the 36th state of the federation, you have to mention the federal capital, because when you go to section 2, that is how Nigeria is defined.
All right, Mr. Kabo, for the sake of our viewers, I'd like you to take us through from the moment a president-elect is announced by INEC. I'd like you to take us through from that process to swearing in what happens. Because, and I ask this question because even till date, 2 days ago, I saw a story saying there's a plot for an interim government, and I was a bit taken aback considering that there is a president-elect, and then, you know, we've seen pockets of protests here and there. So I'll just, for the sake of our viewers, take us through the process, you know.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, but I'm happy. First of all, let me say this. We have a president-elect, but for the moment, you can't have two captains. There is a president whose tenure would end on the 29th of May, so he's in charge, fully in charge. There cannot be two of them. That one would come in when, just like employment, if somebody's tenure is to end on this date, that person, the incumbent, enjoy the full powers of the office until the date expires and the other person is now we have a declared president. Let the heavens fall. The only reason why he will not be sworn in is death. But for now, the incumbent president has no choice in it. The opposition has no choice in it. No other person has any other choice other than waiting for him to be sworn in. No court of law can stop that. That would be infernal, and the consequence will be too dear to imagine. So we have that in place, and the only interface that the president-elect or the president-elect and the president can have is to have a kind of a discussion on the transition, because you have to leave a statement and literature on the state of affairs of the nation so that the incoming president will not go into office blindly, not knowing the state of affairs of the president. So for now, they have to work together to know what is where, so that when you are handing over a document and a literature on the state of affairs that the incoming would have an idea about. So no matter what it is, that's why you saw, no matter how somebody was complaining about the Trump and Biden, that transition and all of that, but this is the way it goes. The law is indifferent to any other calls. The call today is that the president-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu will be sworn in on the 29th, if he's still alive. And of course, I pray he's still alive, because if not, you have to go back into the rigors of having an election.
All right. Well, we do hope all these will be resolved and lots of clarity will be provided. Most of these cases are actually in court, so determination will actually.
Yeah, well, they will. The cases will be going on.
Exactly.
And of course, I think that's for the president.
180 days, 150.
Yeah, the totality of it will be about 8 months because you have 180 days, then 30, then it will be done.
All right. So we'll help to get more perspectives once that is concluded. Thank you very much, Sam Kagbo, for coming on the show, and of course for offering those perspectives on these issues that seem to be lingering.
Funny issues.
Exactly.
No, it's not funny. It's not funny.
It has been turned into something else as it is. So thank you very much for giving us those perspectives.
Thank you for
All right. Well, still Trust TV's Daybreak. We'll take a short break right now. When we return, the conversation continues with another aspect of something else. Do stay with us.